is how can we make energy cheaper? And obviously there's been massive short-term pressures on the cost of energy, as we will all know and have seen and be experiencing ourselves in terms of our energy bills. But there are huge long-term questions as well about energy security, greening our energy supply, and it's been the subject of, I think it's fair to say, a fair degree of chopping and changing from the government over the last 3 or 4 years. And we've seen some very disappointing things, I think, over the last few months. I think it's fair to say that is how we see it at the Observer, in terms of the Prime Minister rolling back on some of the sort of staging posts that are needed to get to the target of net zero, but also there was the offshore wind auction where not a single contract got awarded, which was like a massively missed opportunity. So we're here to talk about this very important question. We've got a fantastic panel for you. So I'm just going to introduce the panel. I should say myself, I'm Sonia Sodha. I'm Chief Leader Writer and columnist at the Observer, and I'm your chair for today. So on our panel, we've got Philippe, who is the Managing Director of Customers at EDF, so he'll be able to give us the industry view. We've also got Chris Norbury from the industry at the other end of the table, who is the Chief Executive Officer of E.ON UK. Then we've got Gillian, who is Head of Energy Policy at Citizens Advice, and Mika, who is lead on industry and climate policy at the TUC. And then we have Jeff Smith, MP, who is a Shadow Minister for Clean Power and Consumers. So what I'm going to ask all of our speakers to do is briefly just set out their thoughts. I think we're going to hear from our industry representatives first and come to a response from our sort of consumer representatives and our Labour politician. And then I'll try and make sure we're going to run till 6, try and make sure that there's plenty of time for questions from the floor as well. And we've got quite a nice small room, which is good. Hopefully it means we can have quite an informal conversation. So I'm going to ask, first of all, Chris Norbury to just give us a couple of minutes on how it looks from where you're sitting.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. So Chris Norbury, Chief Executive on UK. I will just start off with a couple of thoughts. I think we have both an imperative and an opportunity in front of us. I think there is an imperative to do something this winter and beyond by way of targeted support for those customers, those people on very low incomes. Energy bills are still twice that which they were prior to the energy crisis, and indeed much of the government support has fallen away, and therefore we're left with an imperative to do something targeted for those customers who need it most this winter. And we've introduced our own winter support scheme, which will entitle very low income families to either a 25 or 50% rebate on their energy bills for the 6 months of this winter. The opportunity that I think we have is we have an opportunity to drive a significant level of investment in energy efficiency. We have an opportunity to drive a significant investment in a renewable energy system, and in that opportunity is the means to bring bills down permanently, to create good jobs, to revitalise cities, and to make a significant difference to our economy and to the lives of people in this country. We've recently been proud to have been announced as the strategic energy partner for the City of Coventry, a 15-year relationship where we will work with the City of Coventry to decarbonise the energy system within the City of Coventry, which fits as part of that city's very progressive One Coventry plan, which is that partnership sees energy and the energy transition as the means to regenerate the City of Coventry and deliver social value for the City of Coventry. And in there, I think, is a blueprint for the fact that the energy transition is the means to bring bills down over the long term, is the means to boost the economy, to create jobs, and is the means to decarbonise. And the green versus cheap debate that has been prevalent perhaps recently, to my mind, is a completely false binary.
Thank you very much, Chris. Philippe, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think I will be, in fact, on what Chris has said. bringing a different accent. First of all, thank you very much. And to be honest, being a French people, that's a privilege to be here today. So thank you very much for your attendance. The first point I would like to make is that when I look at the situation for this winter, the situation has worsened compared to last winter. We see 36% of customers that are more indebted, and we see that the debt per customer has doubled. So the situation is significantly worsened, and it requires effectively some decisive actions. So what we are asking for is to have better tools to identify the customers that are in need. We need a register which is shared across industry, or industries, utilities, in order to target our efforts to the most vulnerable. We need a social tariff, or we need at least to rethink the way the price cap is set up in order to make the electricity and gas, which are essential for customers, to be affordable. But beyond those short-term solutions, I think that just addressing the question of price for vulnerable customers is just addressing the symptoms of the situation that we are facing. And the root cause of the situation we are facing are pretty clear. In fact, it's our dependency on imported fossil fuels. So to move away from imported fossil fuels, the best way, as Chris has developed, is to reduce consumption. That's the first lever that we can obviously tackle. The second lever is to invest into the UK in order to generate our own energy. And EDF is very much committed in that, with 4.5 billion investment this year, 5 billion next year, to help Britain achieve net zero. And the third way, also to help our customers to reduce their bills, is obviously to help them consume when the energy is the cheapest, when the energy is abundant. And for that, it requires to have a smart system where we can help our customers to shift their loads to the moment when there is a lot of energy available on the grid. I will stop here.
Great, thank you very much. Gillian, what do you make of all this at Citizens Advice? You must be getting lots of kind of worried consumers coming to you about energy bills.
Yes, absolutely. So our data shows similar trends to what suppliers are seeing. We think millions of people are going to be facing winter as bad or worse than last winter without any further action on energy bills. Numbers of people coming to us for help with energy debt advice is rising. The average debts are rising. They're standing at about £1,700 now, which is a third higher than where it was a couple of years ago in 2019. Half of the people coming to us for debt advice are in negative budgets, which means they have more essential spending going out than they have income coming in because of increases in the cost of energy and other essential bills. So we call these households they're living on empty because there is literally nothing left to cut within their budget. In terms of what we could do this winter, the government still has some options. We published a report a couple of weeks ago sort of saying the government could use its data matching powers that exist within the warm home discount already to give people a bit more money. It's £150. If you make that a bit more generous, you could go some long way to sort of helping more households keep the lights on this winter. But again, that's a short-term fix, and it isn't a short-term problem that we're dealing with. We do think that some form of targeted price support or social tariff will be necessary for two key reasons. The first, that it's the right thing to do. Britain is a rich country, and people should be able to heat and light their homes to safe levels. Getting it right reduces pressures on other government-funded services like the NHS. Secondly, the changes associated with the net zero transition will be much more challenging for some households than others. There are real benefits associated with going early and making the switch to low carbon heating sources, using electricity more flexibly. Many households aren't in a position to make that switch, and ensuring that they're benefiting from a more robust form of price protection should help diffuse some of the tensions that are likely to arise over the coming years. So what that social tariff should look like is a question we aim to answer through our project with SMF and Public First earlier this year. We did a lot of work polling the public, working with industry and civil society to come up with some recommendations. The first of which was giving all households a variable cash payment, and it needs to be determined by sort of their income levels, but also how much energy you spend. So if you live in a leaky home and you've got disability or whatever, you're going to use more energy average. So you need the most help. It needs to go beyond the benefit system and target households on low incomes who aren't on means tested benefits. And there's a variety of options, and government should be looking at all options in this space. It's going to need some form of taxpayer funding to ensure that that support can be at a meaningful level, because if you try and socialize the entire cost through energy bills, you're just going to create more problems and more cliff edges for people. So in terms of sort of what we'd like to see Labour look at, so have part of the energy package that's been announced, it needs to include a tariff, social tariff that will run alongside the commitment they made around making people's homes more energy efficient. If you get the overall package right here, you've got a smaller and smaller pool of people who will need top-up financial support each year. You need to build in the data matching and support system, as Philippe said, to identify those households and needs. And that's an energy ask, but it also goes much wider than that, because if you are vulnerable in energy, you're vulnerable across a range of different markets. And if you're not on benefits, you're very difficult to target support at. So if you do this right, you've got something that is helping people across a whole series of different markets. And it's just a better experience. It's a better experience for someone who is in a vulnerable situation, because they only have to report their circumstances once. It's a much better situation for companies, because it's much easier for them to target support to people. And then we need to support people to future-proof their homes. We need the right environment of grants, top-up grants, cheap finance to help people make change. That needs to be backed up by strong and independent advice and support and consumer protections. We're moving into a new world that's going to have lots of bundled deals. There's some really interesting ones that have come on into the market recently, but let's make sure that that's a great experience for people and not the sort of future consumer scandal of the future. And really welcome the commitment from the Shadow Minister earlier today to bring back the minimum energy efficiency standards, because that's something that will make a very big difference for many households. It's the worst housing quality in this country is in the private rented sector. So really important that those standards are improved.
Great. Thanks so much, Gillian. And Mika, what does the TUC want to see both the government and the Labour Party committing to on energy for consumers?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me. And to say I co-lead on industry and finance as a job share role. I don't want to
That's very good of you to point that
out. So obviously we all know particularly high soaring bills recently been devastating for millions of families. Those millions of families include many trade union members who've been forced to make very hard choices. Some of them are trade union members on very low incomes. The eat or heat catchphrase gets put out there a lot. I think it's very easy to put out and forget the reality of what it means in terms of shivering, going hungry, or both. A lot of the members of our unions have been forced to make very difficult choices on also what they can provide for their children. Women are significantly more likely to be affected by high energy bills. Obviously, also face the hardest choices in terms of providing for women because of ongoing racism and patriarchy. In terms of what we do about that, there's obviously a immediate term this winter issues, but with Labour Party conference, Labour's not going to be able to do anything about it. Infants can call for things, but
unless something very unexpected.
Unexpected. Yes, that would be great. I don't look forward to commencing in December. Yes, it would be worth it. It would definitely be worth it. Root causes, as well as fossil fuels, as the trade union movement, we would also put out profiteering. So we would definitely say that there's been a history and also a recent experience of there being very high profits from some companies, and that directly impacts on bills. And ultimately, people's bills money going to those high profits. So our position as the trade union movement, one element is that a future Labour government should nationalise the retail arms of the big five companies. It would include EDF and E.ON. Just, it's good to have dialogue.
Debate.
Not all to agree. It's easy to all agree. Yeah. Obviously, recognising those have not been particularly profitable in recent years. Maybe you wouldn't mind parting with them. Bigger profits that we've seen recently have obviously been oil and gas and power. That's where the profiteering impact has been for people. So in terms of oil and gas, we think we need to see higher windfall tax than what we've seen, and generally our oil and gas taxes should be in line with Norway, and our support of Labour's positions on that. and that can help. And then power, obviously very high. That's been certain power, both renewable power and depending on what contract CFDs they didn't make a profits, but the previous contracts they did, and also fossil power where we did see high profits. And there we think that there should be a new national clean power publicly owned generating company. So very supportive of Labour's Great British Energy. We think that can make a big difference in terms of shifting to and being able to then be able to return revenues to the public, whether it's through lower bills for everybody or targeted, however. We think that ideally Great GB Energy should be on the scale of EDF. That is possible in France, so it should be possible here. And Keir has in speeches made reference to having a company like EDF or whatever. So we put out actually got a little thing here that summarizes all our recent briefings, including one on public power, turning into reality, what we think needs to happen to make GB Energy something comparable to EDF. We also think there should be a social tariff and support a lot of the specific elements, as well as preferably a rising block tariff to ensure how tariffs are structured. But obviously, then the key factor is going to be retrofit and making sure that we're not wasting so much energy in the first place and changing the way our domestic building stock here compares to the rest of Europe. And I think actually the CEO of a different energy supply company in a different session was calling for a vaccination style program in terms of driving retrofit across the country. Again, Labour's commitment to getting to 6 billion per year, we'd like to get that as quickly as possible. In terms of investing into retrofitting homes is absolutely key, and it also being a transformational national mission. It can't be a privatized profiteering program. And I think the point about avoiding a future consumer scandal through retrofit, like if Labour develops a program, rolls it out, and then 2 years in, this basically fails because of backlash, we're not going to be able to do it yet. So it has to be done right, and it has to be delivered in a way that reduces friction for people in their homes, because it's hard when do you want someone coming in and just changing stuff around? It needs to be easy, straightforward. People don't have time to do all the work working out. We think public sector delivery is going to be key for that. Local authorities, councils who are closer to people have to play an absolutely key role. We can't repeat the disaster of the Green Homes Grant on the boroughs. So that needs to be correctly resourced, and hopefully we think all those together can build a future where we don't have anybody having to make those difficult choices. But yeah, sure.
Great, thank you so much. Jeff, that's quite a key challenge there for the union movement. They want you to nationalise the retail energy companies. Is that something Labour's going to step up to?
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to make that.
Not the top. I didn't.
No, so, well, firstly, thanks for the invite. I think I'm 3 and a bit weeks into the job. So I'm very keen to engage, looking to learn from the stakeholders and the experts. We don't dismiss experts in this party, particularly in developing our policy on social tariff, energy efficiency. So I'm keen to engage, keen to learn. But Ed has set out our plan, and he's talked very eloquently about the 4 crises that we face: the cost of living crisis, the climate crisis, jobs crisis, and the energy insecurity crisis, and that clean homegrown energy is the answer to all those, because we know that renewable energy is cheaper. So the long-term way to tackle bills, to make energy cheaper, is to have our green energy sprint, we've termed it. There will be, I think, a common ground on the panel today, and I hope we're going to be able to deliver on a number of the things that people have already talked about. It starts with our pledge for clean power by 2030, creating jobs and growth, reducing bills through those cheaper renewable energy. To do that, we have, as people have mentioned, we've got the plan for GB Energy, a homegrown, publicly owned champion to invest in jobs and supply chains, to invest in industry, to invest. And if we have a stake in that investment, it gives the private sector confidence to also invest as well. So it's about levering in investment from the private sector. And we've also committed to our National Wealth Fund, again, investing alongside the private sector in the infrastructure we need, so gigafactories, green hydrogen, energy storage, industrial clusters and the like. So the way to make energy cheaper long term, the way to reduce bills is to move is the transition to clean energy. At the same time, how do we make bills cheaper for individuals? Again, we've set out our plan for our warm homes plan, insulating and retrofitting a program of up to 19 million homes, £6 billion a year. And reducing, I mean, that kind of starts to pay for itself, because reducing the bills, making homes warmer, gives you a healthier population, greater economic activity, reduces absenteeism at work, reduces the need for financial support for energy bills. So it's kind of a virtuous circle, really, and that is the way to reduce bills long term. We also need to look at how we improve support for individuals, and I see, as a constituency MP, I see my inbox every day, the way that people are struggling, and it's tough. What we've said is that we would strengthen the windfall tax. As you know, there are these loopholes for investment in oil and gas. We don't think they should be there. And if we strengthen the windfall taxes on the big oil and gas giants, then that could reduce bills this winter. And so that's what we've called on the government to do. We need to look sort of slightly longer term about how we what we do for individuals. So we are looking at ideas for social tariff. We've said that we'll look at those. There are lots of different ways of approaching that. We haven't come to a fixed idea about how we target that individual support. I know that the Social Market Foundation has talked, and a number of other organisations have talked about building on the warm homes discount as a way forward. That's certainly something to look at. We're kind of open to ideas at the moment, and there are lots of options to consider. But what we need is that for support to be, I guess, kind of less piecemeal. But the long-term plans that we've got, those long-term investment plans, all the work that we've done today suggests that those can reduce bills by up to £1,400 a year, and at the same time tackle the climate crisis. So I think, as Chris at the start said, this is not just a challenge, and it is a major challenge, but it is an opportunity. It's the biggest opportunity in terms of investment and growing our economy that we face. And so it's the cost of not doing these things is much greater than the cost of doing it. So we need to invest long term in our energy transition to reduce bills and make our energy cheaper.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. I've just got a couple of questions for you and to see if the rest of the panel have got any responses. And then I'll go through it open to the floor. First of all, I just wanted to start off. Labour announced £28 billion a year of green investment with great fanfare. And since then, some people feel that it's been a bit watered down because actually it's not clear when it's going to be 28 billion a year, and actually it might take a few years to work up to it. What's Labour's response on that? Has there been a watering down of ambition there?
No, but we need to be conscious of the financial situation we're in. But more importantly, it would be very difficult to go in and spend £28 billion on day one. And what we've said is that there are things that we need to do, inheriting the mess that the Tories are going to leave. And we need to work with the industry. We need to develop the supply chains that will allow us to invest long term in the industry. And so what we've said is by the second half of the first term of our Parliament, then we'll be ramping up investment for that £28 billion by the second half of the Parliament. So I personally don't think it is a roadmap at all. We're still committed to that £28 billion, but we need to plan it carefully and structure it so we get there.
Mm-hmm. Great. Does anyone want to respond on that, Mika?
I do, because we just wrote a report called Invest in the Future, which works out, basically identifies demands from the trade union movement on clean capital investment into clean infrastructure that could be delivered within the next government. And effectively working out where the 28 billion per year could go. and breaking it down by very specific projects.
Mhm.
And we worked out that there was about between 27 to 32 billion per year. And we don't think it needs to be a rolling back, aiming for it by 2028. We also think, I don't think anybody's ever said 28 billion is the cap. So,
No.
year one, 10 billion, year two, 20 billion, year three, 28, year four, 32. And ultimately, it's more about over the length period that we're getting that level. I think the only other bit is that actually some of the things that could be done very, very quickly in year one would be capitalizing the institutions to deliver. So let's say GB Energy, recognize the fiscal constraints, that's one question. But aside from that, capitalizing GB Energy to get going, to build the confidence so that private sector partners go, you're for real, we'll work with you, we'll do a joint bid for an offshore wind license with you. That can happen in year one. GB Energy won't actually invest the money till year 3 or 4, but other people trust them. Bring in the private sector like co-finance.
Would you like to explore, Chris?
Yeah, no, it's just to build on the point that Jeff, Mika, and others have made. So the co-investment model that's described, there was two things. So the co-investment model and the devolution of some of that, I think, is a means to deliver the investment that's required. So we have a lot of experience in E.ON in Germany and other markets where there is a long history of the public and private sector investing together in energy companies, be that municipalities, be that state governments. We have a long history of working with that model, and we have a long history of making that model work successfully for customers and for the state. And so I think there's a bit perhaps which is not just about can government ramp up to the 28 billion per year. There's the point around co-investment that's been made is really important because it's about how the public and private sector together can invest in reducing energy consumption through energy efficiency measures and can invest in renewable energy system. And I know that we certainly welcome the proposals that take us in that direction. We certainly look forward to an opportunity to invest on that basis. And I think that perhaps is the route to some of the levels of investment that are described.
Gillian?
Yeah, I think when we talk about some of the reality of some of Labour's plans, we need to make sure that we're getting it right for people, because when you're talking about upgrading homes, that is 19 million people who are going to have people come into their homes and make changes to them, and that needs to be a great experience for them. And if we don't get that right, the plan's not going to work. So it's really, really important that we spend the time and the effort to make sure that each of those customer journeys, whether they're getting sort of a fully funded upgrade because of they're on a low income and they need grants to be able to do that, whether it's a combination of sort of cheap finance or fully private finance, all of those journeys and the people who come into their home and install those technologies or retrofit their homes have to have the right skills. There have to be the right consumer protections. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. So it's really, really important we get that right before we start scaling this up to big, big numbers, because this is a sector, the sort of the energy efficiency retrofit sector it's one where we've had a lot of past scandals. There's been a lot of boom and bust in programs. There's been a lot of sharp practice by some of the sort of fly-by-nights who's come into the sector. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm. Philippe?
Yeah. Once again, to bring a different angle on, maybe comment on the model in France as well. It's fair to say that across Europe, across developed countries, in fact, the change of transformation requires a level of investment, which requires effectively for the government to work hand in hand with the private companies. One of the reasons, or the main reason for EDF being a national company is not to cap the prices. I think it's really important to understand this point. The main reason is because to raise more than 200 billion to rebuild, in fact, infrastructure in France, it requires to have the support and the guarantee of the state. It can't be done without the guarantee of the state. So it's to give confidence effectively for people to invest into those investments, to make those investments. That is the reason why EDF is nationalized.
Thank you. And then just one more question for you, Jeff, before we go to the floor. So it really does feel, watching the Conservative Party conference last week and the intervention that the Prime Minister made on net zero in the run-up to it, that there is a bit of an attempt to try and undermine actually what's very high levels of political support for achieving net zero, by talking about this trade-off between, I can't remember who talked about the false trade-off between cheap and green. I think it was you, Chris, wasn't it? But, you know, to sort of say, well, actually, it's either or. And I wondered, A, how worried the Labour Party is about that. And then I'm going to, again, put it out to the rest of the panel just to see if anyone else has got any reflections. But should we be worried about that? Or do we feel that public support for net zero is actually baked in enough that it's not going to be effective?
Well, I'll be interested to hear what people think about that. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There has been that consensus, which is why it's so disappointing that Sunak went down that route. And clearly, I mean, to me, it looks like desperation. It looks like a desperate last throw of the dice. It looks like they've seen what happened in the Uxbridge by-election, thought actually there's a wedge issue. I'm not so sure that they're in the same place. You know, the ULEZ, the congestion charge is a different issue to the fact that people see the climate crisis on their news reports every day over the course of this summer. I think people know that we need change, and I think they are trying to sell the country a puppet. They think that rolling back on these things is going to deliver cheaper bills, or is the right thing to do for individuals, because as I think all of us have agreed, and there is a consensus, the way to reduce those bills is to invest in renewable energy. So I think they may have misjudged the tone of the debate and where the country is.
So do you want to come in, Chris?
I'm happy to. A couple of things. So I think we ran some, we did some survey with our customers after those announcements. So 81% of our customers believe that the climate crisis is a pressing emergency that needs to be dealt with now. So is there support certainly amongst our customer base, we've got 8.5 million customer accounts in the UK, for taking action to address the climate crisis? Yes, there is. The second point would be that without straying into the political debate, I think if you just take a simple example of insulating somebody's home. In insulating somebody's home, you know, we've got to, bearing in mind we've got worst quality housing stock in Western Europe, the second worst quality housing stock in all of Europe except Romania. Insulating somebody's home will reduce carbon emissions, it will reduce bills, it will create jobs, and I think to Gillian's point in terms of some of the sharp practices, some of that comes because of the lack of policy certainty and the lack of long-term investment in energy efficiency. It will create jobs, and people living in a warmer home are healthier and happier. So at a really practical level, delivering the energy transition has economic benefits, has public health benefits, has directly addresses the topic of affordability and makes people healthier, and therefore reduces the burden on the state. I think the third thing would be, you know, and my request to Jeff and to Labour would be that, and I said the same thing at the Conservative Party conference last week, is please let's not let the topic of the energy transition become imbued with some of the language of the culture wars, because it's too important a topic for people. It's about people's health, people's economic well-being, people's livelihoods, for that to be so. And I would hope that there would be cross-party support, that there would be the ability to work together across political boundaries to deliver some of the benefits for the UK that the energy transition can bring.
Mika.
I really don't want to lose that culture war. That would be very bad news. And I also think we could. I think it can become one. It would be disastrous. But that's what the Tories are going for, is making it that. I think people can believe contradictory things at the same time. Very easy. So there is clearly a large scale, broad, most people in the country think climate change is very, very urgent, there needs urgent action. Some of those same people, they can vote Tory, which seems, but they can also believe that we shouldn't take specific actions. With Brexit, we saw that opinions change dramatically, that we can think that there's a general consensus in the country that's saying the EU is possible, and then backlash happens and it grows. And I think there is a risk. The climate change, there's risk of that happening. And also, I think we always need to remember the climate transition can create good quality jobs. It can make people richer. It can deliver better outcomes. We can also get to net zero in a way that makes people poorer. That is possible. We can get to net zero in a way where we have less jobs, where the jobs that we create are more precarious, are worse paid, are less unionized. And to some extent, that is something that we have already seen. So we have to do a lot of work with our member unions where they see offshore wind having been basically a false promise. They see that we've got loads of offshore wind, but not the jobs that we're promised. That's and that's a challenge because actually we do need to get the critical jobs. And Port Talbot, I'll descend on that. Port Talbot Steel Plant, South Wales, government has made a deal with Tata to change, to decarbonise, 500 million to decarbonise. 3,200 jobs are likely to be lost. The half will be ripped out of the Port Talbot community. What message does that send to people there? It sends a message of climate action equals job losses. It doesn't have to be that way. That shouldn't be what happens in Port Talbot. But it reminds us that we have to say we need both a rapid and a just transition that works for people to take everybody with us.
Great, thank you. Gillian, I'm going to come to you briefly, then I'm going to go to the floor, and then I'm going to come to you first for question responses, Philippe. So,
yeah, just to follow up, every time we do polling, there's sort of like Chris said, there's strong support for it, but limited understanding of what it's going to mean for them in practice. And I think that's very much up to actors in that space to be able to bring that to light to people and what they need as well to be able to do that in a way where to deliver sort of well thought through products and services to people is policy sustainability, because when you make an investment in something like a heat pump for your home, that is a 15 to 20 year decision you're making, potentially a 25-year decision. So you want to be able to get that right. And when you think about sort of reaching people, that is sort of, if you miss the cycle, they've just invested in a new gas boiler for the home because that was what was easiest for them. They're not going to come around to thinking about heat pump again for 15 years probably. So it's really important that we've got sort of an approach, and if people want heat pumps, there's a great solution to getting them in their homes in a way that works for them and is affordable.
thank you. Right, I'm going to open it up to the floor now. Has anyone got any questions for the panel? Yes, so gentleman at the back there. Is there a mic, or should we just speak loudly?
I think I should go to project my place.
Okay, great.
Oh, yeah. Jeff said quite rightly that green energy is.
So, do you mind just saying who you are as well?
I'm Phil. I'm a Labour Party member, actually former employee of one of the two members of ours. Jeff made the point that green energy is cheaper, which I fully agree with. However, that fact is not really felt by consumers who do not see any differentiation in their price between green energy and fossil fuel energy. And partly that may be due to the electricity market, the very complicated electricity market we have in this country. So really a question maybe for EDF and E.ON to address particularly. Is there any way you see this, maybe you could perhaps explain the complexity of the market to us, but also whether you see any opportunity to reform it?
Thank you. I'm just going to take a couple more questions. Any more questions? Lady back there in the grey top. Yes, exactly.
Thanks. Good panel discussion. Thanks all very much. We talked a bit about the net zero culture wars, and I think heat pumps in particular and heat decarbonisation has become a real flashpoint. And I think the cost aspect is a really key one. So I was interested to hear thoughts from panellists on how we can make sure, how a future Labour government could make sure that clean heat is affordable for all. Thanks.
Thank you. And then I'll take one more gentleman at the front. You have to.
Oh, yeah, hi. Jonathan Leake, I'm the energy editor at the Telegraph. And I think this is for Chris and Philippe, which is you've talked about this winter. I wonder if you could just elaborate and say how bad it will be and what remedies there might be. Because your brief description sounded pretty serious.
Thank you. All right, Philippe, I'm going to come to you first, and if I could ask you to particularly address that point about this winter, but also the point about actually consumers don't see the difference between the cost of green energy and other energy.
In fact, the three questions are really super important, so I feel like a kid in a candy shop. I will try to maybe to answer this last question, which is the starkest one, I think. Effectively, we have seen an increase in the number of customers by 100,000 more customers in our customer portfolio of customers that are unable to pay for their bills. So that's pretty stark. We have an increase by 25% of the number of installment plans that we are offering to our customers, because we try to find solutions for our customers. But where we can't find a solution is when customers are not engaging with us. So that's really the key for us, is how to engage with customers, despite all the effort that we are making, being proactive towards customers that we see are facing some difficulties. One of the ways that we can engage with customers more efficiently is with smart meters, because smart meters is a great tool to identify when customers have got a discrepancy in their consumption. As an example, with the pay-as-you-go meters, we can identify very easily when customers are going to have financial issues. We have made a clear connection between when customers start to top up their meters with not a rounded figure by paying by pounds or pence even there. So we can engage with them and provide them with solutions like topping up their meters or even writing off their bills. That's the type of support that we can offer to customers. But we require to have an honest conversation with customers how much they can offer in order to find a solution that is sustainable for them. So there is not even silver bullet, except that the necessity for customers to have a connection with us. And that's why we try to diversify our channels to engage with customers. That's why we work obviously with citizen advice, with different charities, in order to try to engage with those customers that are struggling. I think the shame of those customers makes some of them unable, in fact, to call us, and that's really a pity because we have solutions to help them. On the heat pump, I think that's a key question. I can't remember who asked the question. Sorry, that's you. Yeah, I think that's a quick question, obviously, because there is an upfront cost which is pretty significant. And personally, I welcome the grant that has been raised at 7,500 because it makes effectively the pumps being affordable. We have acquired a company which is training and installing heat pumps. And what we can see is that there is a business case which is absolutely obvious for customers when the house is properly insulated. So that's a key point indeed, is that first we need to make sure that we are not oversizing the heat pump because we need to reduce as much as possible the necessity to heat the house, so to have a great and well-insulated house. So it's not only the question of the heat pump, it's also the question of insulation. But the return on investment is great. And to be honest, we are always speaking the fact that in the UK, there are very few heat pumps that are installed. Nevertheless, when you look over the continent, there is 28 million heat pumps installed. So it's not an emerging market. It's a mature market, which is working for millions of households. So we need to embrace it, I think, really. And on the complexity on the wholesale market and why effectively the wholesale market does not give a signal which is lower, despite all the investment on renewable energy. The point is that this market is made on the marginal cost. So the last unit of production of generation of energy, which is cold, is the unit which is making the price of the market. That's the way it works effectively today, which creates the fact that the last unit is usually a CCGT. So it's consuming gas, and because of the cost of gas, it makes the electricity being expensive. In fact, the renewable players does not benefit from that because they have got CFDs. So it means that in fact they have got a fixed price for which they are paid. Those who are benefiting from that are the generators which are operating CCGTs. So as an example, if I take, I think E.ON does not, we are not, because we are not only operating nuclear and renewable assets. But I think that's a critical question. Because effectively it means that we are exposed on until the wholesale market is working that way, we are exposed to the cost of gas, which is a commodity where the price are done worldwide. In fact, those who are making the price of gas is mainly China. In fact, the biggest consumers, the biggest buyers of China of gas in the world are China. So the wealth and the way, in fact, China is buying gas as well as coal, but we don't buy any more coal in the UK, is absolutely critical. And that's something that we need to think about, how we create the conditions that we are independent from this type of evolutions in the wholesale market.
Thanks, Philippe. Chris, is there anything that you would add to what Philippe just said there?
Just briefly, I mean, I would completely echo what Philippe said in terms of the market and the overexposure of the UK to global gas markets. That's a fundamental issue, a fundamental problem, and it's an argument to address it. In terms of the heat pump question and clean heat, the only thing that I would agree with everything that Philippe said. I think in terms of decarbonisation of heating and making that affordable, we've got to have a range of solutions for people. Insulation, as Philippe says, is absolutely the prerequisite. But then, heat zoning, the role of heat networks, that's, I think, got an important role to play in the UK. We massively underutilise heat networks and heat infrastructure in the UK versus that which is elsewhere in Europe. So I think that has an important role to play. And then coming back to the question in terms of affordability, this winter, echo Philippe's comments, what we see is that whilst fewer customers are in debt, the size of our debt book is growing significantly. So what that tells you is that it's being driven by, and our bad and aged debt is growing, and that's being driven by a specific cohort of customers who've fallen off the edge financially, and those top customers almost exclusively pay on demand, so they pay on receipt of bill, and those customers we need to do more, and we need to think long term about the role of price protection in this market, and the construct of the price cap, so that those customers get targeted support both this winter and beyond. And then at the same time, we need to think about how do you actually unlock the role of the market and the role that competition can play in driving innovation to address the question that was asked previously in terms of making decarbonised heating affordable, for example. But we've got a cohort of customers who are really struggling now after it, and we need to pay attention to that coming into this winter.
Jeff, if I can come to you next, particularly the point about heat pumps.
Well, I agree with a lot of what both Philippe and Chris have been saying. Just on the customers don't see the difference. That's absolutely true, but there has to be a yet at the end of that sentence, because it's absolutely at the heart of our mission. That's in terms of decarbonising the energy system. That's what we have to. That's what we have to achieve, so people can see it. On decarbonising heating, I think Chris is absolutely right. We've said there will be a range of solutions for that. I'm kind of. Firstly, I'm going to have to be very brief because I need to go in about 1 minute's time. But I'm very keen to sort of engage with Philippe and Chris and the other people on the panel about how we can address these issues. The other thing we need to look at, of course, is how we might be able to de-link the gas prices from the oil markets. And it's a complicated issue, as I've found in my 3.5 weeks in the job. But it's certainly something that we need to look at taking forward.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. And if we can, if you're having to leave, we can. Great. Thank you. Gillian, I'm coming to you next.
So in terms of how it's going to be this winter, we're really worried, as you would expect us to be. The circumstances of people coming to us for support are as worse as they've ever been, and there isn't any prospect at this point of any relief coming their way. We're not seeing significant dips in other essential bills, and there aren't sort of significant increases in sort of people's incomes or benefit levels to help them bridge that gap. So as a charity, we will continue to provide support to people in every way we can, but there is a limit to what we can do, and we're receiving a lot more demand than we're able to fulfill at the moment, and it's a really big challenge ahead of us. We will look to suppliers to help their customers and make sure, one of the things we always do is we signpost people to their energy suppliers and make sure that they're accessing all the support that might be available, that their supplier can offer, whether they're in debt, whether they can, agree on affordable debt repayment rate, whether or not the supplier's got other support they can offer them, like what both Chris and Philippe have offered to their customers. And just, we will also look and see if there's any other benefits that people can get that we can sign people up for. But, that's going to go some way. It's not going to solve the problem we're facing.
Great, thank you. Mika, do you want to? Okay, great. I'll come to you first. But we've got 10 minutes left, so I might take a couple more questions from the floor, and then I'm going to invite the panel to both respond to them and say anything that you've got to say by means of summation as well. So can I see any hands? I know. Okay, so we have the gentleman there, and then the lady just in front.
Councillor Gillian Boyle from Coventry. Chris mentioned earlier on about the strategic energy partnership E.ON had signed with Coventry City Council. In particular, I just wanted Chris's take, maybe the panel's take on, talk about heat pumps a lot, helping to support people to transition, but unless we insulate, as we said, we retrofit millions of residential homes, and that is always only ever going to be, a pipe dream. I was going to ask actually Jeff, how Great British Energy, whether we're in the next election, actually plays into that, if we can roll out these plans going forward.
Thank you. And the lady in front?
And Louise Rubin from Scope, the disability charity. We've got a really strong interest in the cost of living crisis because disabled people have been so badly hit by it, often because they have medical equipment in the home that needs a constant power supply. So my question is about social tariff, which came up a few times. And there's obviously huge support and interest in it from the charity sector, the disability sector, and other poverty charities. And as we've seen, there's quite a lot of support for it from the suppliers themselves as well. About a year ago, the government seemed to be quite interested in social tariff, and there were lots of supportive noises, but it's all gone very quiet. I just wondered if anyone had any information on what's happened. Where's it gone?
And then just one more question. I think you did have your hand up before.
I was going to actually talk about social tariff.
Okay, in that case, great. You're volunteering a question up.
I'll keep mine quick. I'm Patrick Jones. I'm an energy sector lawyer from Kingwood Mountains. Fortunately, Jeff Smith MP has already left, but I'd really like to understand more what Great British Energy is. I know it's a generator. I've read the Labour Party press releases. How is it going to fit into sort of the energy sector in 2023 when we've got different private entities competing? Is it going to be another one of those? This gentleman here was talking about how they want to be involved in retrofitting, and actually the word used by Jeff Smith was they're a champion. So are they a champion? Are they a public body, or are they another private business competing for contracts?
Well, fortunately, I think the person who that question was directed at a very convenient moment. He genuinely does have another meeting at 6, but thank you for that question. I think it's very well put. So Mika, I'm going to come to you first for any thoughts on this, perhaps particularly on the disability point and social tariffs. I don't know if you've got any intel and any sort of final summing thoughts as well.
I can also add, we do a lot of GB energy.
Okay, great.
Quite a lot of
excellent.
team about advising it. So.
Great.
On the, so I was going to flag disabled people at the start as well in terms of it, but clearly it's essential to get social tariff in there. We had some back and forth with government like a year ago or something like that about where they wanted our input on how to make social tariff work, and they went quiet. And government has also changed repeatedly since then. I think I don't remember whether it was under Truss or before that they were actually talking about it. It seems like it's fallen completely. Like we haven't heard anything else from them. On GB energy, so the initial the champion is partly to keep it broad, and EDF is a national energy champion in France very much. GB Energy will be a power generating company fully owned by the state that will develop. It will own plants, whether they're nuclear plants or offshore wind farms. It will develop them, and it will co-own and co-develop them with the private sector. And the technologies that are on the table are nuclear, onshore wind, solar, tidal stream maybe, isn't clear. So that's one element. Then there was a new announcement yesterday that will also play a role in networks. Bit more fudginess there, in that like it will oversee, it will bring together transmission network operators in terms of, and then it will also be able to bid for building new transmission where there's basically upgrades happening. But it's a bit more messy because it's playing two roles in the same thing. We think that GB Energy can play an important role in retrofit rollout and then basically driving it and doing it at scale, and also because ultimately you've got to procure quite a lot in terms of retrofit, and having the scale to procure by saying, well, actually we want 600,000 heat pumps because that's what we're going to install this year, so let's buy 600,000 heat pumps. That will help make it that national transformative approach. So we think it should be part of it, whether or not GB Energy are actually going into the homes.
Thank you. Gillian.
So just on the question of the social tariff, yes, it has gone silent. I think it's an issue. If you want to solve this problem, you're going to need a degree of taxpayer funding to make it work, because in order to have a meaningful social tariff, you cannot socialize it through bills. And I think that is the challenge, because if you're a cash-strapped government, that is a big political challenge for you to solve. And maybe the people who will benefit from the social tariff may not be your core base. So that might be one of the reasons why it has gone silent. We're still hopeful the government will publish something, but as yet we don't have a date. We know that a lot of thinking has been done on it, and I would hope that something comes forward soon. Just on the GB Energy point, I mean, one of the challenges for Liberals, they're going to have to be very clear about what GB Energy is and what it isn't, because some of the ideas that have been talked about on the panel are very, very different in nature. And if it's an organization that tries to do everything, it's probably not going to do any of it well. So I think that's the question for Labour, is sort of what is it going to focus on? What is it going to really, really nail in doing and transforming this country? And what is best left to other means of delivering change?
Thanks, Gillian. Philippe, over to you for any closing thoughts.
Thank you very much. So maybe first to start with the question about the social tariff. Personally, I'm very passionate about helping disabled people. I am the sponsor of the Care on Disabled People within EDF. And one of the things that we are advocating for the social tariff is that it's a reduction on the unit price, because if, as Jeff has mentioned, it's just an increase of the warm discount, in fact, it's a blunt instrument, which is just a lump of money, when in fact it has to recognize the fact that some families have got more needs in energy than others. So it has to be on the unit price and not only on the standing charge. That's really my point of view, and that's what I am advocating for. I have personally advocated several times towards the counterpart of Jeff, which is Amanda Soloway, about social tariff, and dropped several notes about that. So we are pushing really hard for that, as well as for the register, which will be once again, built by and owned by the government in order to identify the customers that are in it. I think it goes hand in hand with the social tariff. On the insulation point that was raised, I think there are different schemes that exist today. The question is, are those schemes fit for purpose? As an example, when I take ECO, the energy company obligation, that's a scheme which is extremely narrow, which is dedicated to a very specific scope of customers in terms of incomes, vulnerability, and the type of houses. And the level of complexity associated with this type of scheme is incredible. In fact, it requires not only to insulate the house, it requires to change many things in the house, which make, in fact, the change is extremely expensive. I'm not sure that it's fit for purpose, I say it differently. I think that the GB insulation scheme, which is something that both E.ON and EDF has advocated for, is much more fit for purpose and for the challenge that we face in terms of insulation, insulating, in fact, the UK. And it won't be achieved in one day, obviously, because the challenge is huge. We think that there is probably, 7 to 8 million households without a roof insulation which is proper, without also wall insulation which is proper. So there are a lot indeed to do, which requires to give visibility in order to train people to have the skills to address this issue. That's absolutely critical. One of the points that we have seen, the Green Deal is a good example, in fact, is that when you have uncertainty, when you can't invest into, upskilling your people, the team, the person that can, the engineers that can go and retrofit the houses, it creates a big issue indeed. And nobody has the confidence to reinvest in that without long-term commitment from the government. So I think long-term commitment, if you want to retrofit the UK households, is absolutely critical to succeed. The last one, I just wanted to come back to the questions about those disconnections between the gas market and the electricity market. I think that there is a silver light here, which is that despite this strong connection, the fact that we have a lot of renewable energy makes the energy market extremely volatile. So the volatility is not necessarily the best thing, but it means at least that at certain moment in time, the electricity is extremely cheap. In fact, it's so cheap that it can be even negative. So it means that if we want today to make customers benefit from all the investments that has been rolled out across the UK in terms of renewable assets, it requires us to move away from the fixed price addictions that we have. I think the price cap with this fixed price is not giving the good signal for the customers to consume when the electricity is the cheapest, when the electricity is also at the lowest level in terms of carbon emission. So we need to move away from that. That's really the reason why I don't think that the SVT is a good tool. And we need for the customers to have a better understanding when they consume, why they consume, which is the reason for the smart meters. And that's another topic that needs to be addressed, I think, where we are eating a kind of a crystal roof right now, and that's really extremely key to address effectively smart metering if you want to give access to all the UK households to cheap energy when the energy is cheap.
Thank you, Philippe. And Chris, finally, over to you.
Just so take each one in turn, just to the really important point that's made in terms of people with disabilities who require medical care at home. So two things. I mean, the conversation around social tariff doesn't seem to be progressing at the moment. So sadly, that would be my observation. I think we will continue to, as EDF have done and as Citizens Advice have done, to call for the implementation of social tariff and to call for targeted support this winter. I think the point that you make is really important, that when we think about things, we think about questions around standing charges, we think about questions around some of the other components in the construct of the bill, then making sure that we don't do the wrong things. And for example, moving standing charge into unit rate, which therefore disproportionately affects somebody who is having medical care at home. We need to be mindful of that. And not as a shameless plug, but just if it helps, if any of your customers are E.ON Next customers, the winter support package that we've put in place this winter, it's 25 or 50% discount on the energy bill for either families on very low incomes or families who have, or households, who have medical care at home on low incomes. So there are income thresholds there, and the income threshold is higher for somebody who has medical care at home. So perhaps afterwards we can signpost, we can share that with you and make sure that you've got that in case any of the people who support are young customers. Just in terms of the question that Councillor Boyle asked around energy efficiency and insulation, I think I'd absolutely echo points that Philippe made. That a couple of things though. That one, long-term policy certainty is absolutely key in this area. So a long-term commitment to and a long-term investment in energy efficiency is absolutely critical, because without it, none of the other solutions that we talk about are viable. With it, people's bills come down permanently from the point at which the home is insulated. I think there is a significant role there that local authorities, however you construct that, to play. And I'd like to see a greater devolution of the way that funding is allocated. And the key point there is around data and the understanding that a local authority and the access to data that they will have to say, where are the homes that are eligible? Where are the people who need it most? And what is the best way of deploying that funding and that capability in that area? And Councillor Boyle knows there is an example in Coventry where one of the first things that we've done is been able to deploy £2.5 million worth of funding in the last 2 weeks to upgrade the energy efficiency of some homes in Coventry because of that joint approach. And we'd like to do more. The final point in terms of GB Energy, personal view would be that absolutely there is a role for co-investment. Touched on that earlier. The key challenges for me are not around not around generation. It's not around investment and getting capital investment into power generation. The key challenges that we've got are around decarbonisation of heating and decarbonisation of transport, and that is a role that the supply sector can play. That is a role that the supply market can play to drive innovation that will help us meet those challenges. And that's where I'd like to see GB Energy and the role of co-investment targeted, addressing those challenges which we've not yet cracked as a country, which, as Philippe quite rightly says, some other countries are considerably further ahead.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you very much to our panel, including Jeff and Philippe. I thought that was a really good discussion, very wide-ranging. We covered a lot from technical detail to some of the sort of macro politics of it. So thank you all to all of you, and thank you very much to the audience for coming along and for participating in the conversation, and obviously CSMF for hosting with the support of EDF and E.ON. So thank you very much.